The stars looked peaceful through the viewing window of the colony ship New Dawn. Captain Miller stood on the bridge, watching the distant suns twinkle like diamonds against black velvet. His crew was excited. After months of travel, they were finally approaching their new home planet in the Kepler system. "Captain, we're picking up some strange readings," called out Lieutenant Ross from her station. She was a ship scanner operator, and her voice carried a note of worry. "What kind of readings?" Captain Miller walked over to look at her screen. "Energy signatures. Big ones. And they're moving fast toward us." Before Captain Miller could respond, the ship shook violently. Emergency lights flashed red throughout the bridge. More shaking followed, and the sound of metal twisting filled the air. "We're under attack!" shouted Engineer Tom Blake from his post. Hull breach on decks 4 and 5. Through the main window, massive alien ships came into view. They were dark gray, covered in sharp spikes, and easily 3 times larger than the New Dawn. Strange symbols glowed along their sides like angry red eyes. The attacking ships fired again. This time, the blast hit the engine room. The lights went out, and emergency power kicked in, casting everything in an eerie red glow. "Send a distress signal," Captain Miller ordered. "Communications are down, sir," replied Ross. "They're jamming everything." Tom Blake ran toward the captain, his face full of panic. "Sir, my daughter Emma is in the school section. I need to get to her." "Take whoever you need and secure the civilians," the captain said. "Get them to the emergency pods." But it was too late. The alien ships had surrounded the New Dawn completely. Strange beams of light shot out from the enemy vessels, and Tom felt his body become heavy and slow. Around him, other crew members were falling to their knees, unable to move. Some kind of paralysis beam, Ross managed to say before she collapsed. The last thing Tom saw before everything went black was alien figures teleporting onto his ship. They were tall, with gray-green skin and 4 arms each. Their heads were larger than human heads, and their eyes glowed yellow in the dark. They moved with purpose, like hunters who had done this many times before. When Tom woke up, he was in a metal cage. The walls were made of some kind of energy field that buzzed and sparked when he touched it. Around him, he could see other humans from his ship, all trapped in similar cages. The room was huge, with a curved ceiling that seemed to go on forever. "Dad!" a small voice called out. Tom turned and saw his 8-year-old daughter Emma in a cage nearby. She was scared but trying to be brave. Her brown hair was messy and her blue dress was torn, but she seemed unhurt. "Emma, are you okay, sweetheart?" "I'm scared, Dad. Where are we? Who are those scary people?" Before Tom could answer, the floor beneath them began to move. They were being lifted up higher and higher through openings in the walls. Tom could see they were inside a massive arena. Thousands of alien creatures filled the seats around them, making loud noises that might have been cheering. The aliens in the crowd looked different from their captors. Some had tentacles instead of arms. Others had skin that changed colors. There were creatures with multiple heads, and some that looked like giant insects. But they all had one thing in common. They were excited about something terrible that was about to happen. A booming voice filled the arena, speaking in a language Tom didn't understand. But somehow, words formed in his mind. The aliens were using some kind of translation device. "Citizens of the great Vortak Empire," the voice announced, "today we bring you fresh meat from a newly discovered world. These creatures call themselves humans." The crowd roared with approval. Tom felt sick to his stomach. "Our great devourer has not fed in 3 days," the voice continued. "It grows hungry for the taste of new flesh." A tall alien with elaborate armor stepped into view on a platform high above the arena. This was clearly someone important, a leader. His 4 arms were covered in metal bracers, and his yellow eyes gleamed with cruel intelligence. "I am Warlord Crash," the figure announced, "and I have chosen the first sacrifice." His gaze fell directly on Emma's cage. "The young ones are always the most tender." "No!" Tom screamed, throwing himself against the energy field of his cage. The barrier shocked him, sending pain through his entire body, but he didn't stop. "Take me instead, please." But the aliens weren't listening. Emma's cage began to descend toward the arena floor while Tom and the other humans watched in horror. The little girl pressed her face against the energy field, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Dad, help me," she cried. The arena floor was covered in sand that had a strange reddish color. Tom realized with horror that it was probably stained with the blood of previous victims. In the center of the circular arena, Emma's cage touched down and the energy field disappeared. Emma stepped out slowly, looking around at the massive space. The walls of the arena were at least 50 feet high, covered in smooth metal that would be impossible to climb. Above her, thousands of alien faces stared down, waiting for the show to begin. Let the feeding commence. Warlord Kresh announced. A section of the arena wall began to slide open. The opening was huge, large enough for something very big to come through. From inside the dark tunnel beyond, Tom could hear heavy footsteps approaching. Each step made the ground shake. Emma stood in the middle of the arena, looking so small and helpless. She wiped the tears from her eyes and tried to stand up straight, the way her father had taught her to be brave. The footsteps grew louder. Whatever was coming was almost here. "Emma, run!" Tom shouted from his cage, even though there was nowhere for her to go. The crowd fell silent. Even the excited chatter died away as everyone waited to see the legendary devourer emerge from its cave. A massive claw appeared first, gripping the edge of the tunnel opening. The claw was as long as Emma was tall, made of what looked like black metal, but was actually some kind of natural bone. More claws followed, and then a head pushed through the opening. The creature that emerged was beyond anything Tom had ever imagined in his worst nightmares. It stood at least 20 feet tall, with a body that seemed to be part reptile, part insect, and part something else entirely. Its skin was dark green with patches of armor-like scales. 8 powerful limbs supported its massive frame, 4 legs and 4 arms, each ending in those terrible claws. But it was the head that was most frightening. The creature had 6 eyes arranged in 2 rows across its skull. Each eye was the size of a dinner plate and glowed with a soft blue light. Its mouth was filled with rows of crystalline teeth that looked sharp enough to cut through steel. When it breathed, steam came out of its nostrils. This was a devourer, the creature that had killed thousands of beings from dozens of different worlds. The crowd began to cheer again as it stepped fully into the arena, its massive form casting a shadow over little Emma. The creature moved slowly at first, circling Emma like a predator studying its prey. Its 6 eyes focused on her, and Tom could hear it making a low rumbling sound deep in its throat. Emma stood perfectly still, watching the monster approach. She was terrified, but she remembered what her father had taught her about dangerous animals. Don't run, don't make sudden movements, and try to stay calm. The devourer came closer, its huge head lowering until it was just a few feet away from Emma. She could feel the heat from its breath and smell something that reminded her of metal and rain. The creature's 6 eyes stared at her, and Emma stared back. "Please," she whispered, so quietly that only the creature could hear her. "Please don't hurt me." The arena was completely silent now. Even Warlord Kresh leaned forward on his platform, waiting to see the kill. But something strange was happening. The devourer had stopped moving. Its 6 eyes were still focused on Emma, but the aggressive posture was gone. The creature's head tilted to one side, like a giant dog trying to understand something new. Emma, showing the kind of fearless curiosity that only children possess, slowly raised her small hand toward the monster. The entire arena held its breath. Thousands of alien spectators watched in stunned silence as the small human child reached toward the most feared predator in the galaxy. The devourer's 6 eyes tracked the movement of Emma's tiny hand, but the creature made no move to strike. Instead, something incredible happened. The massive beast lowered its head further, bringing one of its enormous claws close to Emma's outstretched hand. The claw, which could easily tear through starship armor, touched her palm with the gentleness of a feather. Emma gasped, but she didn't pull away. The creature's claw was warm and surprisingly smooth. She could feel a slight vibration through it, like the purring of a giant cat. "You're not a monster, are you?" Emma whispered. The devourer's response shocked everyone even more. The creature began to make a sound unlike anything it had ever made before, a low, melodic humming that seemed to come from deep within its chest. The sound was beautiful, almost like singing. In the stands, aliens began to murmur in confusion. Some pointed at the arena floor. Others stood up from their seats to get a better look. This had never happened before in the long history of the games. Warlord Kresh gripped the railing of his platform, his four hands tightening until his knuckles turned white. "What is happening?" he snarled to his aide. "Why isn't it attacking?" The aide, a smaller alien with nervous eyes, could only shake his head. "I don't know, my lord. The Devourer has never acted like this before." Meanwhile, on the arena floor, Emma was discovering something wonderful. As she kept her hand pressed against the creature's claw, she realized that the humming sound was changing. It had patterns to it, like a language made of music. "Are you trying to talk to me?" she asked. The humming changed again, becoming more complex. The creature's other claws began to move, not in a threatening way, but carefully, gently. One massive claw pointed at Emma, then to itself, then made a circular motion. Emma's eyes widened. "You are talking. You're trying to tell me something." The Devourer's 6 eyes seemed to brighten. It made the humming sound again, and this time Emma was sure she could hear sadness in it. The creature looked around the arena, then back at her, and she understood. "You don't want to be here either," she said softly. "You're trapped just like me." From his cage high above, Tom watched in amazement as his daughter had what appeared to be a conversation with the deadliest creature in known space. Other human prisoners pressed against their energy barriers, trying to see better. "Is she actually communicating with that thing?" asked Dr. Patricia Hayes, the ship's doctor and scientist. "It looks like it," replied Captain Miller. "But that's impossible. Intelligence reports say the Devourer is just a mindless killing machine." Dr. Hayes studied the scene below with her trained eye. "Maybe the intelligence reports were wrong. Look at its behavior patterns. That's not the movement of a mindless beast. It's being careful, deliberate. It's thinking." On the arena floor, Emma had discovered something else. When she traced patterns in the sand with her finger, the Devourer watched intently. When she drew a circle, the creature used one of its claws to draw a circle next to hers. When she drew a triangle, it copied that too. "You do understand," Emma said excitedly. "You can learn." The crowd was becoming restless. What was supposed to be a quick, brutal feeding had turned into something none of them had ever seen. Some aliens were demanding their money back. Others were fascinated by the unprecedented display. Warlord Kresh had seen enough. He activated his communication device and barked orders to his guards. "Get down there and end this. Kill them both if necessary. The crowd wants blood, and they will have it." Heavy doors around the arena began to open. Armed Vortex soldiers poured out, carrying energy weapons and wearing protective armor. They moved in formation, surrounding Emma and the Devourer. "Stay back," the lead soldier shouted, though his translator made the words understandable to Emma. "The beast is malfunctioning. We will destroy it and complete defeating ourselves." But as the soldiers approached, something amazing happened. The Devourer's gentle demeanor vanished, replaced by the fierce protectiveness of a parent defending its child. The creature moved with lightning speed, positioning its massive body between Emma and the soldiers. The melodic humming turned into a roar that shook the entire arena. But this wasn't the mindless rage of a wild animal. Every movement was calculated, purposeful. The Devourer used its 8 limbs to create a living shield around Emma while simultaneously preparing to fight. "Get behind me," Emma whispered to the creature, even though it was much larger than her. Somehow, the Devourer understood and adjusted its position to give her maximum protection. The first soldier fired his energy weapon. The blue bolt struck the Devourer's armor hide and bounced off harmlessly. The creature retaliated with surgical precision, using one claw to disarm the soldier and another to knock him unconscious without killing him. More soldiers attacked, but the result was the same. The Devourer fought with the skill of a master warrior, but it was clear that it was trying not to kill unless absolutely necessary. When it could disable an opponent, it did. When it could dodge rather than strike back, it chose that option. "It's holding back," Dr. Hayes observed from above. That creature could kill every soldier in seconds, but it's trying to minimize casualties. Emma watched in awe as her new friend defended her. She had never seen anything so strong, so fast, or so intelligent. But she also noticed something that worried her. The creature was getting tired. There were too many soldiers, and more kept coming. "We need to get out of here," she said to the devourer. The creature's 6 eyes looked down at her, and somehow she knew it agreed. But the arena walls were too high to climb, and the soldiers had blocked all the exits. That's when Emma noticed something interesting. During the fight, some of the energy weapons had been dropped on the sand. She had watched her father work on similar technology back on the ship. Maybe she could figure out how they worked. "Keep them busy for just a minute," she told the devourer. Moving as quickly as she could, Emma crawled under the creature's protective stance and grabbed one of the fallen weapons. It was heavier than she expected, but she managed to lift it and examine the controls. The weapon had several buttons and a small display screen. Emma pressed different combinations, trying to understand the alien technology. On her 3rd try, she managed to change the weapon setting from stun to demolish. "I've got an idea," she called the devourer, "but I need you to trust me." The creature looked at her, and she saw something in its 6 eyes that made her heart soar. Complete trust. This massive, powerful being was willing to put its life in the hands of an 8-year-old human girl. Emma pointed the weapon at a section of the arena wall, where she could see some kind of power conduit running behind the metal panels. Her father had taught her that all energy systems had weak points where the power was concentrated. "Here goes nothing," she muttered, and pulled the trigger. The energy bolt struck the conduit dead on. Sparks flew, alarms began to sound, and a section of the arena wall exploded outward, creating a hole large enough for even a devourer to pass through. "That's our exit," Emma shouted. The devourer didn't hesitate. It scooped Emma up in one of its gentler claws, holding her safely against its chest, and charged toward the hole in the wall. Soldiers scattered as the massive creature thundered past them. As they escaped through the hole, Emma could hear Warlord Kresh screaming orders behind them. "Find them, bring me their heads. No one escapes from my arena." But they were already gone, disappearing into a maze of corridors that made up the interior of the massive ship. Emma looked up at the devourer's face as they ran and smiled. "I'm Emma," she said. "What's your name?" The creature made a complex series of humming sounds that Emma couldn't quite understand yet. But she knew that somehow, someway, she would learn to speak with her new friend properly. And when she did, she had a feeling that everything would change. The corridors inside the alien ship were like a metal maze. The devourer carried Emma carefully as they moved through passage after passage, always staying ahead of their pursuers. Behind them, Emma could hear the sound of running feet and shouted orders in alien languages. "Stop. You cannot escape." The voices of Vorthak soldiers echoed off the metal walls. But the devourer knew these corridors better than anyone. It had been living in this ship for years, and it remembered every turn, every hiding place, every secret passage. With Emma held safely in its arms, the creature moved through the ship like it owned it. They came to a large room filled with strange machinery. The devourer set Emma down gently and moved to a metal panel on the wall. Using one precise claw, it began to tap against the panel in a steady rhythm. Tap, 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 tap. Emma watched, fascinated. The tapping had a pattern to it, like a code. She had learned about codes in school, and her father had taught her about binary systems that computers used. "Are you trying to tell me something?" she asked. The creature looked at her with its 6 eyes and tapped the pattern again. This time, Emma paid closer attention. The short taps and long pauses reminded her of something she had seen in her father's engineering books. "Wait," she said, getting excited. "Is that math? Are you showing me numbers?" The devourer's eyes seemed to brighten. It tapped the pattern once more, but this time it used its claw to draw symbols in the dust on the floor while it tapped. Emma's mouth fell open. The symbols weren't random. They were mathematical equations. Simple ones at first, like 2 + 2 is equal to 4, but then more complex. The creature was definitely trying to communicate using mathematics. "You're really smart, aren't you?" Emma whispered in amazement. The creature made its humming sound again, and this time Emma was sure she heard pleasure in it. The devourer pointed to itself. then tapped out a long, complex series of numbers. Then it pointed to Emma and waited. Emma thought hard. Her father had taught her that math was a universal language, the same everywhere in the universe. If 2 plus 2 is equal to 4 on Earth, it would equal 4 anywhere else too. She knelt down and drew some simple equations in the dust. When she finished, the devourer became very excited. It began tapping out new patterns, more complex than before. These weren't just simple math problems. They were telling a story. You're showing me coordinates, Emma realized. Star maps. You're telling me about places you've been. Meanwhile, back in the prison section of the ship, Dr. Hayes was studying the arena through the viewing screens in their holding area. She had watched everything that happened, and her scientific mind was racing. Captain, she said to Captain Miller, I don't think we understand what we just witnessed. What do you mean? The captain asked. That creature, the devourer, is not just intelligent. I think it's been trying to communicate for years, maybe decades, but no one ever tried to listen. Captain Miller looked skeptical. It's killed thousands of prisoners. How can you say it's trying to communicate? Think about what we saw, Dr. Hayes explained. Emma approaches it without fear, and it immediately stops being aggressive. It responds to her attempts at communication. It protects her from the soldiers. And most importantly, it had multiple chances to kill those soldiers, but chose not to. The captain was quiet for a moment, thinking, You think it's been forced to fight? I think it's been enslaved, just like we are now. And I think Emma just became the first person to realize that. Back in the machinery room, Emma and the devourer were deep in their mathematical conversation. The creature had drawn a complex star map in the dust, showing the location of different planets and star systems. But one area of the map seemed to make it sad. Emma could tell by the way its humming changed to a lower, more mournful tone. Is that your home? She asked, pointing to a cluster of stars the creature had drawn with special care. The devourer's 6 eyes focused on the drawing, and it made a sound that Emma was learning to recognize as yes. Then it drew more symbols, numbers that seemed to represent time. A very long time. You've been away from home for a long time, Emma said softly. You miss it. The creature gently touched Emma's shoulder with one claw and made its agreeing sound. Then it drew more pictures, showing itself as much smaller, being captured by ships that looked like the one they were on now. They took you when you were young like me, Emma realized. They made you fight people you didn't want to fight. The mathematical conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. The devourer quickly erased the drawings with its claws and moved protectively in front of Emma. A squad of heavily armed soldiers entered the room, led by an officer with more elaborate armor. Surrender now, the officer commanded, and your deaths will be quick. But the devourer had no intention of surrendering. It let out a roar that made the metal walls vibrate and charged toward the soldiers. This time, however, its fighting style was different. Instead of just reacting to attacks, it was using strategy. The creature used the machinery in the room as cover, ducking behind large equipment, and using its knowledge of the ship's layout to confuse the soldiers. It would appear from one direction to draw their fire, then attack from another angle. Emma watched in amazement as her friend demonstrated intelligence that was clearly beyond that of a simple animal. This was the thinking of a brilliant military strategist. During the fight, something important happened. One of the soldiers fired his weapon at a control panel, and the panel exploded in a shower of sparks. Immediately, alarms began blaring throughout the ship, and emergency lights started flashing. The explosion had damaged something critical. Through the ship's communication system, Emma could hear announcements in the alien language. Her limited understanding suggested that other parts of the ship were having problems too. The containment fields are failing, she whispered to herself, remembering similar systems on her father's ship. That meant the energy barriers holding the human prisoners were probably weakening. If Emma and the Devourer could cause enough chaos, maybe all the prisoners could escape. But first, they needed to survive this fight. The Devourer had defeated most of the soldiers, but the officer was still standing. He was bigger than the others and carried a more powerful weapon. When he fired it, the energy bolt actually hurt the Devourer, leaving a burn mark on his armored hide. No! Emma cried out, seeing her friend in pain. That's when she noticed something important. The officer's weapon was connected to a power pack on his belt. If she could disable the power pack, the weapon would stop working. Emma looked around the room and spotted a piece of broken metal from the damaged control panel. It was sharp and just the right size. She picked it up and waited for her chance. When the officer raised his weapon to fire again, Emma threw the metal piece as hard as she could. Her aim was perfect. The sharp metal struck the power pack and cut right through the connection cables. The officer's weapon died instantly. He looked down in surprise, giving the devourer the opening it needed. With one swift movement, the creature knocked the officer unconscious. "We did it!" Emma cheered, but their celebration was short-lived. More alarms were blaring now, and Emma could hear the sound of many more soldiers approaching from multiple directions. The devourer looked at Emma and made a series of complex sounds. Then it began tapping on the floor again. Not mathematical equations this time, but something that felt like music. Rhythmic patterns that seemed to carry meaning beyond simple communication. Emma listened carefully and realized that the devourer wasn't just talking to her anymore. The rhythmic sounds were being transmitted through the metal floor of the ship, carrying to other parts of the vessel. "You're calling to someone," Emma said in wonder. "There are others like you on this ship." The creature's 6 eyes met hers, and she saw something there that made her heart race with excitement. The devourer wasn't just intelligent. It was part of something bigger, and Emma had just helped it send a signal that was about to change everything. From somewhere deep in the ship, other sounds began to answer the devourer's call. Roars and cries and songs that no human had ever heard before. The ship's other enslaved creatures were waking up, and they were angry. Emma smiled as she realized what was happening. She hadn't just made friends with one intelligent creature. She had started a revolution. The sounds echoing through the ship were unlike anything Emma had ever heard. Deep roars mixed with high-pitched calls, creating a symphony of rebellion that made the metal walls vibrate. The devourer listened to each sound carefully, its 6 eyes bright with something that looked like hope. "How many others are there?" Emma asked. The devourer held up its claws, showing her numbers. First 8, then 10, then more. Emma's eyes widened as she realized there were dozens of intelligent creatures trapped throughout the ship, all forced to fight for the entertainment of the Vorthak Empire. The ship's emergency alarms were getting louder. Through the communication system, Emma could hear Warlord Kresh screaming orders in his alien language. Even without understanding the words, she could tell he was furious and scared. "The containment systems are failing." His voice boomed through the speakers. "Deploy all guards. Kill every escaped prisoner. I want order restored immediately." But it was too late. The devourer's call had awakened something that had been sleeping for years. Throughout the ship, creatures that had been forced to fight each other were remembering who their real enemies were. The sound of running feet echoed through the corridors as Vorthak soldiers rushed to contain the growing rebellion. But for the first time in decades, they were outnumbered. "We need to help the others," Emma said to the devourer. "And we need to free my people too." The creature made its agreeing sound and began moving toward the door. But Emma had an idea that would be much more effective than running through corridors. "Wait," she said. "You know this ship better than anyone. Where do they control everything from? The main computer room?" The devourer's eyes brightened with understanding. It pointed upward, indicating several levels above them. Then it drew a quick map in the dust, showing the path to the ship's central control center. "If we can get there," Emma said excitedly, "I might be able to shut down all the containment field at once. My dad taught me about computer systems." The journey to the control center was dangerous. The corridors were filled with running soldiers and the sounds of battles happening throughout the ship. But the devourer knew secret passages that the guards had forgotten about. They crawled through maintenance tunnels and climbed up service ladders. The devourer moved with surprising grace for such a large creature, always making sure Emma was safe. When they encountered soldiers, the creature would create distractions that allowed them to slip past unnoticed. As they climbed higher in the ship, Emma began to see other escaped creatures. A massive, 6-legged beast with crystal spikes along its back was fighting 3 Vorthak soldiers at once. The creature moved with the same intelligent strategy that the devourer used, protecting itself while trying not to kill unnecessarily. "They're all like you," Emma whispered in amazement. "They're all smart." In another corridor, Emma saw a creature that looked like a giant butterfly, but with metal wings that could cut through steel. It was using its wings to disable security cameras and alarm systems, showing the same kind of purposeful thinking. "How long have they kept you all prisoner?" Emma asked. The devourer made a series of sounds that Emma was beginning to understand meant many years. Then it showed her more numbers in the dust, dates and time periods that stretch back decades. "Some of you have been here your whole lives," Emma realized with horror. They finally reached the control center after climbing for what felt like hours. The room was enormous, filled with thousands of screens and control panels. Dozens of Vorthack technicians worked frantically at various stations, trying to regain control of their ship. At the center of the room stood Warlord Kresh himself. His 4 arms gestured angrily as he shouted orders at his subordinates. When he saw Emma and the devourer enter the room, his yellow eyes burned with rage. "The human child and the defective beast," he snarled. "Kill them both immediately." The technicians reached for their weapons, but the devourer was faster. It leaped across the room, using its 8 limbs to move like a spider across the walls and ceiling. The creature landed among the technicians, carefully knocking them unconscious without seriously hurting them. Meanwhile, Emma ran toward the main computer console. The alien writing on the screens meant nothing to her, but the basic structure of the system looked similar to computers she had seen before. All computer systems had certain things in common: power sources, data connections, and emergency shutdown procedures. "Stop her," Warlord Kresh commanded, pulling out a large energy weapon. But the devourer was there in an instant, placing itself between Emma and the warlord. The energy blast struck the creature's armored hide, leaving another burn mark. But the devourer didn't back down. Emma's fingers flew over the alien keyboard, pressing different combinations of symbols. She didn't understand the language, but she understood logic. Emergency systems always had override commands, usually hidden in the main menu structure. "What are you doing, human child?" Warlord Kresh demanded as he reloaded his weapon. "Setting your prisoners free," Emma replied without looking up from the console. On her 5th try, she found what she was looking for. A screen appeared showing the ship's layout, with hundreds of red dots marking containment fields throughout the vessel. There was a master control switch at the bottom of the screen. "Found it," Emma cried and pressed a button. Immediately, alarms throughout the ship changed tone. The screens around the control room flashed warnings in alien text, and Warlord Kresh's face turned an even deeper shade of gray. "Impossible," he shouted. "The containment fields are designed to be unbreakable." "Not if you turn them off," Emma said with a grin. Throughout the ship, energy barriers that held prisoners for years suddenly disappeared. In the human holding area, Captain Miller and Dr. Hayes felt their cages deactivate. "We're free." Captain Miller shouted to the other humans. Emma did it. She actually did it. But the humans weren't the only ones being freed. In dozens of other prison sections, creatures from across the galaxy stepped out of their cages for the first time in decades. Some had been captured as children, like the devourer. Others had been imprisoned for so long they had forgotten what freedom felt like. The rebellion that had started with Emma and the devourer was now a full-scale revolution. Warlord Kresh fired his weapon again, but this time the devourer was ready. The creature used one of the metal control panels as a shield, then grabbed the warlord with 2 of its powerful claws. "You cannot escape," the warlord snarled. "Even if you free every prisoner on this ship, the Vorthack Empire has 1,000 more vessels. You are nothing compared to our power." But the devourer wasn't listening to threats anymore. It carried the warlord to the main communication console and forced him to activate the ship-wide broadcast system. "Tell them to surrender," Emma said firmly. "Tell your soldiers to stop fighting." "Never," Warlord Kresh spat. The devourer made a low, threatening sound and tightened its grip slightly. The warlord's eyes widened as he realized that this creature he had thought was just a mindless beast was actually intelligent enough to understand exactly what was happening. You understand everything," he whispered in shock. The devourer made its agreeing sound, and Emma stepped forward. He understands that you stole him from his family when he was young, she said. He understands that you forced him to kill innocent people for entertainment. And he understands that now it's time for justice. All around control room, screens were showing feeds from different parts of the ship. The freed creatures were working together, using their different abilities to help each other. The crystal spike beast was breaking down doors to free more prisoners. The metal-winged butterfly creature was disabling weapon systems. Other creatures Emma hadn't seen before were using their own unique talents. But most importantly, none of them were killing unnecessarily. Despite years of forced violence, they remembered the difference between justice and revenge. Attention all Vorhack soldiers. Emma spoke into the communication system. Your containment systems are down. Your prisoners are free. But we don't want to hurt anyone who doesn't try to hurt us. Surrender now, and no one else has to get hurt. The response came quickly. Throughout the ship, groups of soldiers began laying down their weapons. They had seen what the freed creatures could do when they worked together, and they knew they were outnumbered. Within an hour, the great arena ship of the Vorhack Empire was under new management. The prisoners had become the guards, and the guards had become prisoners. Emma stood in control center, looking at all the screens showing different parts of the ship. Human prisoners were being reunited with their families. Alien creatures were helping each other heal from years of captivity. And in the engine room, her father was working with some of the freed aliens to understand how the ship's technology worked. "We did it," she said to the Devourer. "We actually did it." But the creature's expression showed that it knew this was just the beginning. It pointed to the screens showing star maps and made sounds that Emma was learning to interpret. "You're right," she said. "There are more ships out there, more prisoners who need to be freed." The Devourer nodded its massive head and began tapping out mathematical sequences on the floor. This time, the equations were more complex than anything it had shown her before. They weren't just star coordinates. They were battle plans. Emma smiled as she realized what her friend was proposing. They weren't just going to escape from the Vorhack Empire. They were going to fight it. 3 months later, the news of the Arena Ship Rebellion had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The impossible had happened. Prisoners had not only escaped from a Vorhack vessel, they had captured it completely and turned it into a rescue ship. Emma stood on the bridge of what was now called the Freedom, watching the stars through the main viewing window. The ship looked very different from when they had first been brought aboard. Where once there had been prison cells, there were now comfortable living quarters. The arena floor had been converted into a meeting hall where representatives from dozens of different species worked together. "Emma, we're receiving another distress signal," called Captain Miller from his new position as the ship's human commander. The Vorhack had reluctantly agreed to work with their former prisoners, and many had proven to be decent people who had simply been following orders. "Where from this time?" Emma asked. "The Rigel system, another arena ship, holding approximately 2,000 prisoners from 15 different worlds." Emma looked at her friend, who now stood beside her on the bridge. The Devourer had chosen a new name for itself, one that Emma could pronounce. It called itself Keeper, because it had kept the memories and knowledge of its people alive during all the years of imprisonment. "What do you think, Keeper? Are we ready?" The massive creature made its agreeing sound and began tapping calculations on a nearby console. Over the months, Emma had become fluent in Keeper's mathematical language, and other crew members were learning it too. Dr. Hayes had discovered that this form of communication was actually superior to spoken language for technical discussions. Keeper says the ship's weapon systems are fully operational. Emma translated for the bridge crew, and the new Alliance fleet should arrive at the meeting point in 6 hours. The Alliance fleet was something that no one in the galaxy had thought possible. Freed prisoners from the Freedom had returned to their home worlds, carrying the story of the human child who had spoken to the Devourer. More importantly, they carried Keeper's mathematical language, which allowed different species to communicate more clearly than ever before. The result was unprecedented cooperation. Species that had never even heard of each other were working together to rescue prisoners and fight the Vorhack Empire. "Incoming transmission from the Andorian Republic," announced Lieutenant Ross, who had survived the initial capture and now served as communications officer. The main screen flickered to life, showing a blue-skinned alien with large eyes and intricate markings on their forehead. This is Admiral Zara of the Andorian fleet. We are honored to fight alongside the crew of the Freedom. More ships appeared on the screen as additional allies joined the communication. There were the crystalline beings from the Sigma sector, who communicated through light patterns. The gas cloud entities from the nebula regions, who existed as pure energy but could control mechanical ships. And dozens of other species, all united by a common goal. "This is amazing," Dr. Hayes whispered to Emma. 3 months ago, most of these species didn't even know the others existed. Now they're working together like they've been allies for centuries. Emma smiled. Keeper says that's because mathematics is the same everywhere. When you can share ideas clearly, cooperation becomes natural. The plan for the Rigel system rescue was complex but elegant. The Freedom would approach the target arena ship openly, pretending to be a normal Vorthack vessel. Meanwhile, the Alliance fleet would position itself just outside sensor range. Once the Freedom was close enough, Emma and Keeper would use the ship's communication systems to send mathematical messages directly to the imprisoned creatures on the arena ship. The math language could be transmitted through power conduits and metal structures, making it impossible for the Vorthack to intercept or stop. "Beginning approach to target," Captain Miller announced. As they drew closer to the Rigel system, Emma could see the massive arena ship on the viewing screen. It looked exactly like their own ship had when they were prisoners, dark, menacing, and covered with weapon arrays. "I wonder how many intelligent creatures are trapped in there," Emma said quietly. Keeper made a series of sounds that Emma had learned meant sadness and determination mixed together. Through their mathematical conversations, she had learned that Keeper's people, the Ancients, had once been the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. They had been peaceful explorers and teachers, sharing knowledge with younger species. Then the Vorthack Empire had begun its expansion, capturing and enslaving anyone who stood in their way. The Ancients had tried to resist, but their peaceful nature made them vulnerable to the Empire's brutality. Keeper was one of the last survivors of their race. "After we free the prisoners from this ship," Emma said, "we're going to find your people, aren't we?" Keeper's 6 eyes focused on her with an expression she had learned to recognize as hope. The creature began tapping out coordinates. Not for the rescue mission, but for a distant star system where ancient sensors had once detected other ancients in hiding. "The Vorthack think your people are extinct," Emma continued, "but you don't think they are." Keeper made its agreeing sound and drew mathematical equations in the air. The numbers told a story of hidden colonies and secret refuges where the last ancients waited for the day when it would be safe to emerge. "Target vessel is hailing us," Lieutenant Ross reported. On the screen, a Vorthack warlord appeared. This one was even larger than Kresh had been, with scars across his gray-green face and armor that gleamed with metals. "Identify yourself," the warlord demanded. "You are not scheduled to arrive in this system." Captain Miller stepped forward, speaking calmly. "We are the Arena Ship Domination, carrying new prisoners for the Games. We request permission to dock and transfer our cargo." The warlord's yellow eyes narrowed suspiciously. "I know every ship in the fleet. There is no vessel called Domination." Emma held her breath. They had prepared for this possibility, but everything depended on their next move. "Check your records more carefully," Captain Miller replied. "We are operating under direct orders from High Command." While the warlord consulted his records, Emma and Keeper moved to the communication station. Keeper began tapping out mathematical messages, sending them through the ship's power systems toward the arena ship. "Are you getting through?" Emma whispered. Keeper's eyes brightened, and it made its agreeing sound. On the communication console, patterns of light began appearing. Responses from the arena ship. The imprisoned creatures were answering back. "How many?" Emma asked. Keeper showed her numbers with its claws. Over 3,000 prisoners, representing 23 different species. And from the mathematical patterns in their responses, at least half of them were as intelligent as Keeper itself. "Records show no ship called Domination," the warlord announced, his suspicion turning to anger. "You'll prepare to be boarded and searched." "Now will be good," Captain Miller said quietly. Emma activated the Alliance fleet beacon. Immediately, Ships began appearing all around the arena vessel, Andorian cruisers with their distinctive blue hulls, crystalline vessels that looked like flying diamonds, and the energy-based ships of the gas cloud entities. The Vorthak warlord's face went pale. Impossible. How did you? Surrender your ship, Emma said, stepping into view of the communication screen. Free your prisoners, and no one has to get hurt. The warlord stared at her in shock. You're just a human child. How dare you? I'm the human child who freed the Devourer, Emma said firmly. And this is Keeper the Ancients. She gestured her friend, who moved into view of the screen. The effect on the warlord was immediate. Every Vorthak in the Empire knew the story of the arena ship that had been captured by its own prisoners. But seeing the legendary Devourer standing peacefully beside a human child was something else entirely. The Ancient, the warlord whispered. But they're supposed to be extinct. We're not extinct, Emma said, speaking for Keeper. We're just getting started. The battle that followed was unlike any in Galactic history. The Alliance fleet didn't simply attack the arena ship. They surrounded it and began transmitting mathematical messages to every prisoner aboard. Within minutes, a rebellion was starting from the inside, while rescue ships provided support from the outside. The Vorthak defenders found themselves facing the same impossible situation that had befallen Warlord Kresh. Their own prisoners, working with tactical brilliance and perfect coordination, systematically disabled the ship's defenses while protecting the crew from unnecessary harm. When the fighting ended, Emma stood in another captured arena, watching as thousands of prisoners celebrated their freedom. But this time, she wasn't alone. Dozens of other young beings from different species approached her, eager to learn the mathematical language that had made their rescue possible. You did something amazing here, Dr. Hayes said, joining Emma on the arena floor. You didn't just free prisoners. You created a new form of civilization. Emma looked around at the incredible sight. Beings from across the galaxy working together, sharing knowledge, and preparing to explore the stars as partners rather than enemies. Keeper did most of the work, Emma said modestly. I just listened. Keeper made a sound that Emma had learned was the ancient equivalent of laughter. Then it began tapping out a new set of mathematical equations. These weren't battle plans or star coordinates. They were teaching formulas, ways to help young beings from any species learn faster and grow smarter. What's Keeper saying? Dr. Hayes asked. Emma smiled as she translated. Keeper says that the best teachers are always the ones who remember what it feels like to be students. And the best leaders are the ones who remember what it feels like to be small. On the viewing screens around the arena, stars beckoned with infinite possibilities. The galaxy was huge, and there were still millions of prisoners waiting to be freed. But for the first time in centuries, they had hope, and it had all started with one small human girl who decided to reach out her hand to a creature everyone thought was a monster. Where to next? Captain Miller asked as he joined them. Emma looked at Keeper, who was already drawing star maps in the sand of the arena floor. The coordinates pointed toward the hidden refuges where the last ancients waited in exile. Home, Emma said. We're going to bring Keeper's people home. As the Alliance fleet prepared for its next mission, word of their victory spread to every corner of the galaxy. The Vorthak Empire, which had seemed unstoppable for centuries, was learning a new reality. Humanity had arrived in their galaxy, and humanity had brought friends.